Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on a really fascinating and honestly a pretty misunderstood social pattern: passive dominance. We're going to deconstruct the quiet, unspoken signals that can totally reshape an entire room's dynamic. We're going to figure out how the absence of a reaction can paradoxically become the most powerful force in the room. It's a dynamic that I think most of us have felt, but very few of us have ever been able to actually put a name.
This quote right here, it just nails the central paradox we're talking about today. We're all taught to think that power and influence come from action, right? From speaking up, gesturing with confidence, leading the charge. But what if, in a lot of high-stakes situations, the person who does the least, who reacts the least, is actually the one everyone sees as being in control? In this explainer, we are going to dig into exactly why that is. How can something like stillness, which is literally the absence of behavior, become such a potent social signal?
So to unpack all of this, we're going to move through 6 key ideas. We'll kick things off with the stillness paradox itself. Then, we'll dive into the internal feeling it creates in other people, something we're calling the feedback vacuum. From there, we'll map out the ambiguity loop that really fuels this whole dynamic. We'll explore the deep psychology behind it all, with the heuristic of certainty. And then, we're going to shift gears to how you can maintain your own agency with the power of observation. And finally, we'll land on the biggest insight of all, naming the dynamic.
All right, so let's get into it. Section 1, the stillness paradox. Right here, we're going to define what passive dominance really is and explore those nonverbal cues that create that, unshakable image. This is the foundation for everything that's going to follow. Okay, so here's our working definition. Passive dominance is all about influencing a group not through what you do, but through the sustained absence of doing anything. It's this profound lack of nonverbal feedback. Just think about the normal rhythm of a conversation for a second. It's like a dance of these constant, subtle signals, right? Well, this is about fewer nods, minimal facial expressions, really steady, unbroken eye contact. It's not about being aggressive. It's about a breakdown in that expected social give and take. It's a lack of reciprocity. And that sustained absence has this powerful, unspoken effect on everybody else in the room.
So, that brings us right into section 2, the feedback vacuum. Now that we've kind of defined the external behavior, let's shift our focus inward. Let's explore the psychological and even the physiological response this creates in other people. What does it actually feel like to be on the receiving end of all this stillness?
And that feeling is what we call the validation vacuum. You see, normal human interaction, it's built on this constant flowing feedback loop of micro-expressions. A little nod here, a raised eyebrow there, a quick smile. These are the tiny little data points our brains use to navigate the social terrain and just confirm, hey, we're on the right track here. But when that feedback is suddenly and consistently gone, the loop just breaks. This creates a kind of social static, this deep ambiguity that triggers an unconscious, anxious need in us, the observer, to fill that silence, to do something, anything, to get the interaction back on solid ground.
And this anxious need, it shows up as something called the overfunctioning reflex. Have you ever been in a meeting, faced a totally blank stare, and suddenly you find yourself talking faster, the words just kind of tumbling out, or maybe you start over-explaining a point you know you've already made perfectly clear, just adding all this unnecessary detail. Your hands might start gesturing more, you might jump to offer solutions before anyone's even asked. These are all totally common, unconscious attempts to get a reaction, any reaction, to close that open feedback loop. And the real cost here? Your own cognitive focus starts to erode because your brain is diverting massive resources to simply trying to read the silent.
And here is a really fundamental shift in how we think about this. The still person isn't necessarily doing anything to actively control the room. They're not trying to manipulate or dominate. Instead, the room and everyone in it begins to unconsciously calibrate to their stillness. The entire group dynamic literally retunes itself to the least reactive person in the system. And that makes them this unintentional and often totally unaware center of social gravity.
So this leads us directly to our third section, the ambiguity loop. If the feeling vacuum is the feeling, well, this loop is the engine that drives the entire dynamic. We're about to deconstruct the self-sustaining cycle that creates and reinforces this perception of power, and it's a cycle that operates almost entirely beneath our conscious awareness.
Okay, let's walk through this 4-phase loop. Step 1, it starts with a still baseline. An individual just maintains a high level of physical stillness, which signals calmness and control to everybody else. Step 2, the anxiety vacuum. Like we just talked about, the observer feels this rise in anxiety because they're not getting those normal social cues. Step 3, the pacing delay. Now, the still person uses these long, deliberate pauses before responding. A 3-second pause in a normal conversation can feel like an absolute eternity, right?
and it makes the observer mentally scramble to fill that gap. And finally, step 4, the minimalist response. When a reply finally comes, it's often super short, low energy, minimal. And the observer's profound relief at finally getting any response, well, that unconsciously reinforces the perceived status gap. It's a really powerful, self-sustaining cycle.
So why is this loop so incredibly effective? I mean, why do our brains automatically decide that stillness equals high status? Section 4, the heuristic of certainty, dives into the deeper evolutionary reasons. We're moving from the what to the why.
You know, at the core of this whole thing is a powerful mental shortcut our brains use all the time: the stillness equals power heuristic. This is an evolutionary signal. For thousands and thousands of years, survival depended on quickly assessing threats and social hierarchies. An animal that doesn't flinch or fidget when it's facing danger or uncertainty, well, it's seen as fearless. Our brains take this exact same shortcut. No fear equals higher status, more competence, and more power. It is a deeply, deeply ingrained instinct.
And this really shows how we so often get the cause wrong. Our brains are pattern-making machines, right? So we build a story. We assume the stillness is a strategic choice, a tactical poker face designed to intimidate us. We see it as this clear sign of higher competence. But the reality is often so much more neutral, and it's way less about us. It could simply be a personality trait, or a way that they regulate their own stress. It could be a learned cultural norm, or even just a physical habit they're completely unaware of. Correcting our own interpretation is a really crucial step to breaking the spell.
And this misinterpretation then gets amplified by two really powerful cognitive biases. First, you've got the halo effect. We're culturally conditioned to see the strong, silent type, and we automatically associate their stillness with all these positive traits like competence and authority. At the exact same time, the spotlight effect kicks in. We become hyper-aware of our own natural movements, feeling like our little gestures are being judged as nervous or weak in comparison. This just increases our cognitive load and fuels that powerful urge to fill the silence. So, knowing all this, how are we supposed to respond? Well, that brings us to Section 5, the power of observation. And here, we're going to shift from just deconstructing the problem to actually talking about application. We'll frame awareness not as some defensive tactic, but as the key to neutralizing the pattern and, crucially, maintaining control of your own internal state. The fundamental shift you have to make is this: you must move from being a reactor inside the dynamic to an observer of it. The goal is not to fight back or try to outstill the other person. That's just playing the same game by different rules. No, the goal is to regulate your own state by consciously observing the pattern for what it is, without getting sucked into the emotional current of that feedback vacuum. So here's a practical framework for that, something we can call the stillness audit. It's a simple, 3-step internal process. First, reappraise. The second you feel that anxious urge to over-explain, you internally name what's happening. This is a non-reactive stillness pattern. Just labeling it keeps your rational brain engaged. Second, don't mirror. Make a conscious choice not to increase your own activity. Don't start talking faster. Maintain your own comfortable baseline. This alone can disrupt the loop. And third, correct your view. Actively remind yourself that the stillness is probably unintentional and not some tactic aimed at you. This removes the perceived intimidation. And the ultimate goal here is to build what's known as referent power. Now, this is a much healthier and more sustainable form of influence. It's not gained through some kind of unspoken domination, but by becoming a reliable source of stability. It's the power you get by providing a balanced baseline of respect. First for yourself, by regulating your own state, and then for others. You become the person who keeps the environment stable and productive for everyone. And that brings us to our final section, naming the dynamic. This is where we distill everything we've talked about down to its most empowering takeaway, the key that unlocks this entire pattern.
Here it is, the core insight, the central paradox we started with, now explained. The person who appears to need the least validation, the least feedback, the least from the room, is often the one to whom the entire room unconsciously calibrates. Your overfunctioning reflex is a perfectly natural reaction to this powerful biosocial signal of perceived needlessness. But here is the most critical takeaway of this whole thing. Once you can name this signal, once you can see the architecture of the dynamic for what it is, it loses its power over your internal state. Think of it like a magic trick. Once you know how it's done, you are no longer under its spell. The simple act of recognition collapses its influence.
You are no longer reacting to some mysterious force, you are simply observing a known pattern.
We'll leave you with this final thought. Power dynamics weaken once they are recognized. Awareness really is the ultimate tool for personal agency. By understanding the architecture of stillness, you're no longer just a participant getting swept up in the current. You become an observer, empowered to maintain your balance, your focus, and your own quiet authority.